Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
Welcome to the third video on resolving marital issues.
We hope that you've been following through with the first two videos and that you are doing the homework, because if you're not ready to do this session.
Right. Doing the homework is what's going to make you be in a good position to be
Right.
able to do this next step.
So if you're ready, let's get started.
Hey, it's good to be back with you today. We're excited about another opportunity to get to work on your marriage relationship with you.
Yes, and we're excited because we know this works. It's very effective for those that apply it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work. We've given you a lot of homework to do. We hope that you're doing the homework, because if you're not really going to be ready for the session that we're about to get into.
This is a challenging session, or it can be. So there's a foundation that we really need to have in place with you before you do today's session.
Yeah, and really, if you think about it, every challenge that we face has a equal reward with it. So it's very rewarding when you feel like you can present an issue and your spouse hear and understand it.
Right, because what it does is it softens both of your hearts to hear each other, and isn't what you really want. So our big thing is, if what you've been doing hasn't been working for you, why keep doing it? We're asking you to lay down the way you've always done it to pick up a different way of doing it.
Yeah, you could feel pretty uncomfortable making some of the changes that we've had for you. And we know this, again, that this is a challenging time in your relationship.
Right.
But we want to just briefly go over making sure that you're keeping up, first of all, you're taking your relationship with the Lord to the next level.
Right.
And all these things that we presented, the unconditional love and acceptance, the caring days, all these things that we presented to you, we want to make sure you're doing those. That is going to put you in the proper perspective of how to bring up an issue.
So if we look at a relationship with the Lord, that prepares you for today by making you sensitive to the Lord, because really there's times when we interact with each other, maybe we're frustrated, and that relationship doesn't tug on us hard enough to do the right thing and make the right choices, but relationship with God can.
We're answering to someone that's over our spouse and over ourselves.
That's critical. And also it makes us sensitive, because, the more we care about our walk with the Lord, the more we don't want to grieve Holy Spirit.
Right. He's the one that made the marriage relationship, and so looking at what he tells us to do and change is going to make it all work better.
Right. So does it matter to me whether or not I'm obedient to God's Word? Well, God's Word has things to say about marriage. The more I develop my relationship with the Lord, the more I care about being obedient to what His Word says to me as a spouse about marriage.
And it all ties together. The way that we interact in our relationship with God is very close and similar to how we interact with our spouse.
Right. Another thing is Caring Days homework.
Yeah, and so we want to make sure that you're doing the things. You're not just saying you're too busy.
Right.
I couldn't find time, because you can't glide by on these things and effectively do the part that we're about to bring up on bringing up issues.
So Caring Days kind of establishes or solidifies the foundation, because it's bringing in some positivity that you and your spouse can feel. And that's critical, because if you're going to talk about issues, there's got to be something solid there so that you don't both cave in the middle of it. Caring Days takes us back to when we were dating and thinking of all the little things.
Yeah, it's really finding the ways that that speak to our spouse love and care and affection. And so when we're doing those things, we're feeding the relationship to grow and be strong.
Right. And so we encourage you, if you haven't been working on a relationship with the Lord, get busy with that. If you haven't been doing caring days or there's some days you missed, put it on your phone. It's not an excuse when you're working on your marriage to say, well, I didn't have time or I forgot. Make a notification. Remind yourself. Put a note somewhere so that every day you see those caring day things that you will do for a given day.
Right. And remember that you're staying out of the negative issues and everything until we give you the rules in this session for how to do that.
Right. So the unconditional acceptance is part of that foundation, because if you can't accept your spouse as is,
True.
You're going to want to change your spouse. Well, you can't talk about issues if the goal is, I want to change you.
Right. Because we have to focus. We're the only one that can change ourselves. We cannot change another person. They have to willingly do that, and we're really just going to frustrate ourselves if we're trying to change another person against their will.
And we can't be a dictator. We can't treat the other person like a puppet or like our child. They actually should. We should give each other the respect to make our own decisions and be okay with that.
Right.
Well, you can't do that if you don't have unconditional acceptance for each other.
Right. So this is going to be an exciting session to get into, things to learn and to understand, and we want to
talk about the 10 qualities, the 10 positive qualities that you wrote down.
Right.
So you want to continue to think about those things, and you want to make sure that your thoughts are in a positive direction. So we're not going to be taking the negative thoughts, remember. We're going to instead be replacing them with positive thoughts. So if you're still dealing with issues and you've continued during this period of time to bring up issues, but not with positive requests. Remember, we gave you the positive request as a way to deal with them while you work on that unconditional acceptance and get that down good.
Making a simple request.
Right. So you want to make sure that that's the only way you've been addressing issues during this time.
So if you're still at each other and you cannot accept each other, you're really not ready for the material that we're going to present today.
I would encourage you to take at least one more week, maybe two, so that you can be solid on your foundation before you proceed to the next step.
Right, because we want to make sure that you're getting everything out of the time that you're putting into it, and so if anything is missing, then it's just going to make it not effective as it should be.
Because what we don't want to happen is for you to take your old ways of dealing with it and them start trumping the methods we're going to teach. Or for you to mix them, because you're going to decrease the efficacy of dealing with issues if you do that, or you're going to just totally sabotage them altogether.
Right.
That makes it not beneficial. So if you want this to be beneficial, you need to go forward with the right mindset.
Right. If you're too busy, it's good to acknowledge, hey, I'm just too busy to put the time into the kind of focus and attention that's needed to work on the relationship in this way at this time.
Yeah. If you're too busy, you need to decide, do I want to continue or do I need to wait until a better time?
Right. There can be seasons in a person's life that they can have other things going on that they feel like they're not ready to.
But we would encourage you, make your marriage a priority and make the time. Why wait until it fails or until one spouse reaches the point of no return? Because we see that.
Right.
We see where one spouse wants to make it work and the other one is tired of it.
Right.
And that's not good. You don't either one want to go there, because this is covenant before God. We want to encourage you, stick with it, make this a priority, because this is God's will for you as a married couple.
Right. So
if you're too busy, please make the time that you need to save your marriage, to solidify your marriage, to take it from an unstable place to a stable place.
And again, we want to encourage you that we have seen so many couples strengthened, helped go from a lot of distress and being separated and everything to having a rewarding relationship.
And so what if one of you is unwilling or unmotivated? So maybe you don't have the that push
Right.
to really do what we're asking of you. It's not a matter of not having time or being too busy. Why are we meeting? Right.
Yeah. Well,
So,
for the reward, you have to see that the reward is there
right.
of having a satisfying relationship.
The thing is, what we need to see is there is hope, because we can tell you, obviously not everybody is willing to join up with us and walk this out, but let us walk this out with you. Let us walk with you from where you are to a stable place. So we ask that you pray about this. What does God want for your marriage? What does God want you to do? And we ask you, give it everything. If you're one of those that you're watching this and you're on the verge of just throwing in the towel and saying, you know what, I'm just going to go my own way, we ask, give this your best shot. Because when a person goes from one marriage to the next, at some point they're going to say, because we hear this, I want to make this one work. Why not now? Why not stop and give this marriage, everything you've got?
Right. And really, statistics show that it really just becomes easier the more a person leaves one relationship and goes into another one to do it again.
For sure.
Yeah.
So right now we ask, God can give you the motivation, because, we're offering this as a sacrifice to the Lord. We're not in the marriage to get what we can get out of it. We're in it to have a servant's heart and be obedient to the Lord and let him work on us, because these struggles are working something into or out of us if we yield to the Lord and seek his direction through it.
Right. And so we want to let you know that we're going to be giving more homework, and it's just kind of building. So it's getting
right.
more.
It'll get more demanding.
Yeah.
So evaluate yourself, not your spouse. Evaluate yourself. Are you ready to proceed? We pray that you are. And we look forward to entering into this session with you all and talking about how do we deal with our issues.
Right. So let's get into today's material. So one of the first things that we want you to realize is that you don't want to vomit up an issue at your spouse's feet just any time during the week.
Yuck. Even to say that sounds pretty disgusting. What does it mean to vomit up an issue at our spouse's feet? Vomiting up an issue at our spouse's feet means that we would be just bringing up an issue at a random time, and nobody's prepared for that.
Yeah, you're catching each other off guard, and maybe one of you is about to leave for work or go out for something, or just came in the door from somewhere. You're not in a frame of mind, and you're not thinking about what the rules of engagement are. We want you to have set aside times, maybe 2 or 3 times during the week, for a certain period of time, maybe for 20 or 30 minutes, that you're going to say, this is the time that we're going to bring up issues. Let's say, for example, you've got Tuesday at 6:30 and Saturday at 5. And so the rest of the week, you're not bringing up issues. If something comes up, then you're thinking of what the next day is. You're going to put it down, and you're going to bring it up at that time.
The idea is to keep the overall feel of the relationship positive.
Right.
So if we have certain times that we bring these up, that creates an overall feeling of positivity, but we have those periods of time with boundaries around them and rules for those periods of time where we're dealing with our issues, and we're not letting it spill over into the rest of the week, because that's when we're using unconditional acceptance, all the things that you've been practicing that have built up to this point.
So if something comes up, an issue comes up, it's something you want to talk to your spouse about Sunday at 3:00, then you're gonna write it down. You're gonna hold on to it, and then when your next time you have set aside, for example, is the Tuesday night, then you're gonna bring it up then.
Right. You always could ask the spouse, I have something I need to talk to you about. When would it be a good time for us to talk if we talk before our scheduled time? What happens when we don't deal with our issues is one spouse is going to go into a panic mode.
Right. So a lot of times that's where the issues are, is when you don't know that you're going to have an opportunity to bring up something that was bothering you or that was important to you that you want to make them aware of.
It's usually the wife that will do this, because the man, and these roles can reverse, but the man tends to withdraw and she tends to pursue. Right. Because a woman is so relational. She will know what the issues are, and she will present them to connect, to protect that deeper intimacy in the relationship. But when a man withdraws, she'll go into a panic mode, and if you're carnal, you'll be tempted to nag, or to insist that we're going to resolve this and we're going to resolve it now, regardless of whether it's a good time or not. Because if we never resolve our issues and we're always running from them, then we've got one person that feels like, you know what, if we drop this, we'll never come back to it.
Right. So if your spouse has the confidence knowing that, hey, I'm going to have an outlet, or if you have that confidence, I know I'm going to get to bring it up. And right now is not the best time. So many times we sabotage our issue, but just because it's not a good time for our spouse.
Right.
So one thing that does is it helps you get in the right frame of mind when you know that, say, Tuesday at 6:30 is our time to bring up an issue. Then when that time comes, all the rules that we're about to give you about discussing an issue, you're going to think, okay, these are the rules that I need to abide by. I think you'll begin seeing a lot of breakthrough in your relationship just when you are putting out the effort to hear the issue that your spouse has, and that you're able to give your input also.
Right. And so we want to make sure that we are interacting on a positive manner with each other. So that's critical, the positivity. And the unconditional acceptance really comes into play here.
Right.
We want to work toward we. It's not going to be he or she, or, well, you win this argument. That's not the goal.
No, the relationship is what you're working on.
Yeah.
Not my side or her side or individuality. I mean, maybe that's some of the problem that could be being faced, is just having more of a singular mentality of living as a single person. When now you're a married couple and need to think as a we. We have so many choices of ways that we can bring up something. There can be negative ways, neutral ways, or positive ways. And we want to make sure that we are understanding what is a positive way of presenting information to my spouse.
If I step on my spouse's emotional toes, I am responding in a way that comes across to him as negative. He's the only one that can tell me what would sound positive or at least neutral to him.
Right. So that's the information about your spouse and the way your spouse interprets what they're hearing that we need to make a change in.
And we can't say, well, that's just who I am, and you just need to be okay with that. Well, no, not if we're blending into unity with another person.
Right.
Remember, the husband-wife relationship is different from any other. We can't classify it like we do our interactions with our siblings, our parents, our coworker, our best friend.
Right. So another thing is we want to make sure that you're focusing on simple issues at first, not getting into something that's very complicated and has a lot of different facets to it. You want to just stick to something simple.
Think baby steps as we go into this part. If you do it too quickly, you may not use the tool well. So in the beginning, using the tool well is more important than the issue.
Right. So the process is more important than the issue itself. So if you get down, this is the right way to bring up an issue, then you can apply that to any issue, big or small.
Yeah. So we're going to start with things that are so simple, and we're only going to progress as we feel healthy and stable on that level. Don't go too quickly. Think about it as you want to use the appropriate tool. So you wouldn't use hedge trimmers for heart surgery, would you? You would use the appropriate tools that a heart surgeon would use.
Very delicate.
And there's a difference in using a delicate tool for the heart, which is what we're talking about in the intimacy level of a marriage. So if you pull out the hedge trimmers, guess what? You're going to cause pain and discomfort, screaming and yelling and ouching.
Right. Yeah, so let's be mindful of what's going on in our spouse's interpretation of what we're saying.
Right. And remember, the goal is to please your spouse, not to please me. It's not all about what can Sean do to make me happy. It's more about what can I do to please him. Remember 1 Corinthians 7. We're talking about biblical relationship here.
Right.
Not the way the world looks at it. Me, it's all about me. It revolves around me. What do I want? What about my needs? No, it's all about serving our spouse.
Right. And so all the biblical teaching on marriage that we've talked to you previously about, this is coming into the application of it here.
And so we want to be able to communicate behaviors that are causing a problem here in the relationship.
Right.
Because problems cause distance. And as we increase in distance in the relationship, bigger things can then come between us. And guess what? That makes us back up, because anytime there's pain, we'll back up. And then something bigger is able to get in there. But guess what? It will cause pain and discomfort and cause us to back up, which creates greater distance.
Right. So, a lot of times we use the phrase stepping on each other's emotional toes. And so you're going to back up if somebody steps on your toes.
Right.
Even if it was an accident, it's appropriate to apologize. And so we want to understand what the sensitivities are.
Wow, I'm ready to go into the tool. Are you?
Yep, let's do it. All right, let's get started. We want to give you some rules for making a simple request or bringing up an issue.
This is fun. And I think you're going to find that it's fun too, because it helps you be able to talk again.
Yeah.
So we want to do it well, right? So put out a lot of effort. Your biggest effort is going to be in the direction of self-control.
Right. So we also call this, speaker-listener rules. And so the first thing that we're going to cover is from the standpoint of the speaker, which is the person that's bringing up the issue.
But we have to know who is the speaker and who is the listener.
True.
And what we find in marital problems is everybody's trying to talk and nobody's listening.
Role confusion.
Yes. So the thing is, though, if we're going to have a good conversation, we know we have to have a speaker. But do we stop and think, I also have to be an aggressive, active listener?
Right. And when is it time for the speaker to become the listener and the listener to become the speaker? You're going to switch roles at some point.
So what we're going to talk to you about is how to recognize what your role is, and then how to operate in that role.
Right. So once you've decided who's going to go first, who's going to bring up the first issue, then we want to make sure that you're keeping that as a positive request. For example, we use the putting your socks in the hamper as a good example of that. Hey, when you come in for the evening, would you please put your socks in the hamper?
Can you see that is very straightforward, is a positive request? It's very simple. So the thing is, what we would like for you to stick with first are things that have to do with the way you interact over an issue. It might be tone of voice, facial expressions, choice of words, body language, things that we need our spouse to know, this is a problem for me, things that will close or escalate you.
Okay, why don't you give an example of that? That'd be a little bit different than the socks in the hamper.
True. For me, because of whatever in my childhood, not even sure why, but if Sean talks to me in a firm voice, now we can look at that and say, oh, that's not a sinful thing, it's not a bad thing, but for Rhonda, it's very negative. I associate that.
It can shut her down.
Right. I associate that with things from my past, the way my dad taught to me, which probably wasn't bad, but for that particular situation, it pulls in. When Sean does that, it pulls forward a lot of negativity associated with that voice. And all of a sudden, I'm flooded with negative feelings and thoughts and thought patterns that then I will be tempted to project onto Sean. Can you see why it's important for Sean to be aware that's a problem for me and why it's a problem for me.
Right. So that's a good example of something, the type thing that you want to be bringing up
Yeah.
is as you are the speaker bringing up an issue, things
True.
that are impacting the relationship.
So if I were the speaker and I initiated with an issue, I could say something like, Sean, when we are talking and you get tempted to get upset, would you please be careful not to use a firm tone with me? The presentation would hopefully not come across in a negative way to Sean.
There's
It's
no
a
manipulation.
positive
It's
request.
just a simple request.
And so and we'll get into all of this, but it needs to be it needs to not have any manipulation, insinuations, or
Right.
barbs.
Or when you do that, you always, or you
Yeah.
never.
You're so mean.
Right.
The way you talk to me sometimes, you know, can you
Right.
see where
Yeah.
that can
So
go?
we don't want to attack our spouse when we're making a request. We don't want to gush on them.
The thing is, it may feel mean to me, but that doesn't mean he was mean.
Right.
And it doesn't mean he even felt or intended to be mean.
Right.
It only meant that there was a perception I had associated with something.
Mm-hmm.
And I just need to make him aware, but I don't need to tag him with my feelings.
Right.
My feelings are not always accurate.
Right.
I can't take those and identify somebody because of them.
Right. And we'll get into the part of sharing how something impacted you later, but at this point, you're just going to make a simple request without all the insinuations, manipulation, and barbs.
Right, because like Sean said, there is a place for talking about the way that made me feel on a surface level.
The impact.
But some people want to emotionally dump on the other person and drag them through the mud. Let me let you know how you made me feel.
Right.
And that can be vicious.
Yeah.
And that's not appropriate. We don't
Yeah.
have to do that.
Stay out of that. So one thing we want to remember is that you're keeping the speaker is keeping the presentation to 1 to 3 sentences. You're not going to go into a lengthy monologue and let me tell you for 10 minutes everything about it. So you just want to make it very simple. I think you can get the listener lost in the forest of all the things that you're sharing.
So don't make this a grand soliloquy where you go off and look into the moonlight and start speaking. Because what happens is you will deposit 5, 10, 20 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only deal with one issue at a time.
Right. So you want to keep the attention span on the issue and being able to clearly understand what's being brought up. And so you want to make sure that you're staying out of any body language or any nonverbal communication, something that you're communicating negatively to your spouse.
So think the kinds of things you want to present at this level, and it would be great to make a list individually. You don't have to discuss them and say, look at my list against you. Make a list, a private list that you prayerfully consider of the things that close or escalate you. And then go and prioritize them. What's the first thing you want to address when it's your turn? Because you're going to take turns. It's going to go slowly.
So as far as the listener goes, we've got rules for the listener. And so when you hear the speaker present their message in 1 to 3 sentences, the listener wants to basically just restate exactly what they heard. Don't add anything to it. Don't add to it your interpretation of that. You just want to simply state back, just like when Rhonda presented that about the tone of voice. I pretty much just repeated back exactly what she said.
And you don't want to twist it. So what you're saying is,
you don't ever want me to bring up my issue, or you don't want me to be me, or something that you would add to it.
And can you see that's twisting the message? That wasn't said. And it certainly brings up what we would call a topic B, which I guess is the next thing we're going to talk about. Topic A, topic B. Wow, this really impacted our own relationship.
Right. And that, again, is keeping an identification of who's the speaker and who's the listener.
Only the speaker can keep you on topic. Right. So whoever's the speaker is going to present an issue, and that's topic A. You want to stay on topic A. Right.
So if the listener repeats back and says something that the speaker says, that's not what I meant, that's not what I said,
Right.
then the speaker is going to have to say it again until the listener gets it. Think about it like playing catch.
Mm-hmm.
The speaker throws the ball. The listener, when they caught it, that means they got what the speaker was saying. I understood what you're asking, what you're saying.
And you want to be careful as the listener that when you respond, you're not bringing up topic B. Topic B is another facet of the general idea. And you might say, well, it's on topic because it's my perspective. It's how I think about what you feel. It's what I see.
You're not giving
based on what you said. I'm only responding to what you said.
Right. You're not giving your interpretation of what the speaker said.
Or of the speaker's feelings or thoughts or intentions. So I might say, for example, I really would appreciate it. Would you please not use the firm tone with me? So what would be a topic B, for example?
Well, I wouldn't have used that firm tone if you had not spoken to me in a disrespectful way.
Can you see that's topic B?
Right. So that's really bringing up something that would be more of an issue of disrespect. So
yeah, and the thing is, it's related, right? Because we know that if I speak in a sassy or disrespectful way, guess what? It's going to stir him to want to respond to me in a negative way.
It doesn't mean that your issue, the listener's issue, is not important. Just
it
because
is important.
It's not being brought up at this time, it just means there is a specific time and place for that to happen.
Right.
So that's why we want you to stick, rigidly to these rules about when you bring up your issue.
Right. So the thing is, it would be appropriate to make sure, well, that's not what I was saying. That's a topic B or whatever works for you. But take it back to the topic. This is what I was saying. The thing is, what I need Sean to hear me saying is, regardless of what might have triggered it, the firm tone is still not okay with me. Now, it is valid, and he certainly needs to share with me if I came across in a disrespectful way, but that's another topic for when it's his turn to be the speaker.
All right.
So we have to take turns. When it's my turn to be the speaker, I call the topic, and the listener needs to be very careful to stay on topic and hear if the speaker says, well, that's off topic. That's not what I'm talking about. It's related, but it's not what I'm trying to say. Then we have to regroup and say, well, what are you trying to say then? And we have to be able to set aside our own agenda to hear what the speaker's saying.
And this is often where, when you bring up an issue, this is where things get derailed, and you begin to feel like that I can't ever bring things up because
we dealt with that.
My spouse always turns it around to what their problem is, and then we can never deal with my issue because they're always bringing up their issue.
Yeah.
So everybody's trying to be heard, and nobody's listening.
If I can only see myself, I can never hear the speaker. I have to set aside me to see Sean.
So one thing, you want to the speaker wants to ask the listener, how did I present that? Was that presented well? And then you can kind of critique each other, over the presentation. What could be done to present it better? You don't want to turn this around now when this happens into it becomes its own issue.
No.
But you do want to know at some point, did I present that well?
Right. You want to be careful that you're bouncing. So if the speaker, notice, is the one that's inviting that comment. The listener isn't offering it. The speaker is requesting it. Did you feel that I presented well?
True.
If the speaker doesn't invite it, we ask that if the listener just can't move forward because of the way the speaker presented, it's okay to say, that came across as negative. Please be careful not to go into detail. Negative is very general and surface.
Could you try rephrasing that, saying that a little differently?
Right. Maybe watch your tone, please, when you restate that. Could you watch your facial expressions, please, when you restate that? That was a little difficult for me.
A lot of times there's a lot of baggage that goes along with the request we're making that can be shutting down and sabotaging our effort to bring our issue up.
Which is why we don't want to be in a challenging request right now. Because, if my spouse is requesting something that I have a hurdle to get over before I can do it, well, then we have a more difficult issue, and then we should wait for that. That should come later. If we're too intense, and we probably get into this in a minute, but as women especially, we need to reduce that level of intensity, because men don't, it's a hindrance for a man. Too many words, too much emotions. Because men don't do intensity or too much emotions well. If we put those women, if we put that in there, and for a percentage of you, those roles are reversed, especially if the male is more verbal and communicates more easily. Don't put something in the picture that's going to sabotage your message. You probably really want to be heard. Why jeopardize it from your first sentence? So women, you want to be very careful to decrease that intensity, because for a man, it says there's going to be a fight. And we want to be really careful that we're not communicating that. We're not talking to a woman. We're talking to a man.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, it's okay to ask, hey, could you turn down the intensity level? I think I could hear what you're saying better if it didn't have all the intensity in it.
We've done that.
Yeah.
And
it's worked well.
Or can you watch your emotions right now? You sound, you're coming across as defensive. We don't want to blame or accuse.
Yeah. The intensity of emotions sometimes can cloud it so much we can't really hear what's being said for all the emotion.
For the way it's said.
That's
Sean
true.
used to say that to me over the years, and I couldn't get it. And I said,
I can't hear what you're saying for the way you're saying it.
And I basically responded, well, you're going to have to teach me then, because I'm just not getting it. The thing is, once the listener has grasped the message, you want to make sure the speaker agrees that you got it. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So you want to ask also, is there anything else? The listener wants to be the one to initiate asking the speaker.
Right.
Is there anything else that you have to say about that, or any other thoughts or feelings that you have about that?
The thing is, if the listener does not invite, speaker, let that be it. Because the listener can gauge how much he or she can take. Because the idea is to present it in little tidbits of information.
Yeah, you're not going into a long soliloquy.
You want to bounce on that tidbit. So if I present a tidbit to Sean and we bounce well on that, he can ask me, is there any more information on this?
And you're just giving it a little bit at a time.
Another tidbit.
Something, it's just like feeding a baby. You don't, gag them by giving him an enormous amount of food. It's probably going to feel pretty challenging for some of you to keep that issue down to 1 to 3 sentences.
Right, but we want to bounce. And that's why it can only be on tidbits, right? You can't bounce on large amounts of information.
And you want to, lay aside anything that would be escalating the other one.
Right.
So, and when you find out what the issue is and you've done something, that offended your spouse, the listener should apologize. That would be appropriate to say, hey, I'm sorry for doing that.
And the thing is, one thing that we encounter with couples is, why should I apologize if I didn't do anything wrong? And if I stepped on your toe in the foyer at church, guess what? I would apologize. But did I sin against you? Did I wrong you willfully? No. But if I unintentionally caused some sort of discomfort for you, I would apologize for doing it. And so, we want to apologize. Somehow we can connect with them on what happened. And we need to find a way to validate. We don't have to agree, but we need to find a way to validate and connect with our spouse on what they presented. If I'm told that my tone sounded negative to my spouse, I have to be able to say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to come across in a way that would feel like that to you. How could I present that differently next time that wouldn't feel negative?
Yeah, that can be a humbling thing, to be able to say you're sorry to your spouse.
We have to be able to change our behavior when our spouse presents an issue to us.
Right. So that's important, to come up with a plan. How are you going to change for in the future.
Because if I stepped on your toe in the church foyer and you said, ow, and I said, oh, I'm so sorry, but I keep doing it, I'm negligent. And I'm just not paying attention because it's just not as important to me. But guess what happens to you then? You'd start avoiding me in the foyer because I'm probably going to step on your toe because I'm just not paying attention.
A lot of this is just finding out what those things that we're doing that are offending our spouse are, right, and changing that.
So once the listener understands and agrees to change, okay, I will be careful to watch my tone so I don't come across in a disrespectful way or a way that's sassy. What is the plan? So the listener wants to let the speaker know what you just shared is very important to me. And I have the attitude of appreciating that they share their heart. And now you know something more about your spouse. You can go into a deeper unity because you know this. But what will you do to change? How will that look different next time?
That's good.
So going forward, it's going to happen again.
Right. And you don't want to make sure that you know how to formulate a new habit, make a new plan, a new habit for how you're going to accomplish these things.
Because when we're changing old habits, we're going to fall on our face. If we see a baby learning how to walk, we wouldn't say, yeah, he's been walking really well today, didn't fall down once, he's walking now. But tomorrow he fell on his face. Well, I guess he'll never walk. Well, we know that would be ludicrous to say that. That's part of learning to walk.
Yeah, and you want to find out, what are some new ways that how could I say that differently? What could I do better to let, this be known?
So how could the listener respond better next time? It may be clear. If it isn't clear, it's appropriate to say, what could I say that would come across positively or at least neutral to you? So if I need to say something, I may have a lot of feeling associated with it, and it may not be that I couldn't say it. It may be that I just used too much negative feeling when I said it. If I come across as very disappointed and Sean takes it as I feel disappointed in him, or if I feel aggravated and I show my aggravation, that's going to have an offensive feel to it.
Right.
So I've got to tone all that, dial it down, zero it out if you can. Think business meeting.
Yeah. And present well.
Right. So then we need to know, okay, if you accidentally talk to me with a firm tone next time, how can I let you know in a way that wouldn't be negative to you? So that would be part of the plan.
Yeah. And so you want to make sure that anything that is offensive to your spouse, that's something you're paying attention to.
The listener needs to confirm, did you feel like the issue you shared was resolved?
Right.
If the speaker says, yes, I do, and you can feel that way if you feel that there's a good plan in motion. If the speaker says, no, I don't, you want to say as a listener, well, what would make you feel that this was resolved? So that you've got a solid plan in place.
That's right. So that's kind of the goal that we want to arrive at, is that the speaker, and this can really take place very quickly. We've gone into a lot of detail to explain to you a lot of minute details about everything, but this can take place very quickly. And when the speaker is presenting something in 1 to 3 sentences, the listener is repeating it back, asking for more information, apologizing, then the speaker is going to let them know, yes, that's what I was saying, and I feel like the issue is resolved. That pretty much, wraps it up.
And remember the plan. So you got the presentation, the hearing of it, the apology, the plan. The plan involves the listener verbalizing, I will do it differently this time. This is how I will do it differently next time. And the speaker finding out, well, you're probably, but not you're going to do it again. That sounds doubtful, but we know it will happen again. So what's the plan for if it happens again? What will you say to trigger that listener to know this is happening again? Remember the changes that we had in mind. And the listener can let the speaker be aware of a good way to alert them to the fact that this is happening. And lastly, that it was actually resolved.
Yeah. And so once you've gone through all these steps, you want to swap places then, and the other spouse is going to be the speaker following the same rules.
And the thing is, after you've watched this entire video, you'll be meeting with a coach that's going to help you practice it. So hold off. You've walked through it. We want you to be familiar with the steps in a lot of detail so you can be guarded and control that while you use the method. But don't use it yet. We ask that you wait until you interact with your mentor couple or a coach that will coach you on walking through this, because one thing we see is spouses have barbs and they don't even realize it. They'll present their positive requests not so much of a positive way. And so your coach or your mentor couple can kind of help with that, can help you catch when you're doing that, and also point out any other negativity.
All right. So that's going to be some details that the coach that's working with you is going to help you to see some
Right.
more changes that you can make in your presentation.
Right, because there's a lot of ways men will come across because they don't understand female, or a female will come across because she doesn't understand male. That would be offensive to anybody of the opposite gender. So many times we hear couples when they begin to use this tool, and one of us will be like, you know what, to any man, any man would have a problem with that, or any woman would be hurt or wounded at that. And we don't know. We're innocent about it. Nobody's ever taught us these things. And so that's why it's critical, though, to have your mentor couple or your coach present so you can make sure you're using the tool correctly and that you're going through the method in the right way.
Right. So we think this is going to be a really rewarding experience for you.
Yes.
To I think, finally, some of you begin to be able to hear and to understand the issue that your spouse is presenting to you. All right, well, let's look at what your homework is going to be. After this, we want you to set aside 2 to 3 times a week for bringing up issues.
You want that to be 3 times a week if you're having significant issues. If not, 2 times a week might be enough for you.
So we want you to take 20 or 30 minutes during each time that you've set aside to practice going over the speaker-listener presentation.
And so you want to make sure that if an issue comes up between times, make a note of it. Have somewhere where you write down issues and then prioritize. Which one will you deal with when it's your turn next?
Only bring up the issues during the set-aside times,
right,
not during any other day or time during the week.
Right. And unless you make a brief positive request, and that's still okay with the unconditional acceptance, but then the spouse can say, okay, or don't prefer to do that, and you respect that. It's not going to be an issue if it's outside the bounds of those times.
One thing that you're going to notice is that when you bring up the issues only on the specified times and not during other times, that it gets you in the mentality of when you bring the issues up to be, this is how I do it.
Right.
This is a set time for it. Now, what are the rules? And I'm going to play a game by the rules.
And you'll develop habits of how to do it well. It's not to say you'll never mess up. We still mess up.
Right.
But it will help you be more consistent in dealing well with them and in being able to resolve them.
Right. And this will begin to build more of a change in your mindset of how that you are doing it right instead of all the times you did it wrong.
You want to only cover one issue at a time, not more than one, because you're probably not going to resolve it if you've got several issues open at the same time.
That's a lot of times what we see happen with couples is that because they're trying to bring up multiple issues at one time, you can't solve more than one issue at a time. And so that's where we're seeing the frustration many times happen. We can't ever resolve our issues because you're bringing up 5 or 6 at a time.
Right. And if you start talking about one and you see it's a little more complex than you thought, you've got 2 choices. Break it down into a smaller piece that you can be content with, or save it for later.
Yeah. And so a lot of times, that is going to make it super simple for your spouse to be able to hear and understand exactly what you need on that one point.
Yeah. And then you want to make sure that the focus is on learning the process.
Right.
We do want you to be able to work through some simple issues for sure, but the process, learning to do it well, is more important at this stage.
Yeah. If you find that when you are bringing up your issue, the speaker presents the issue and it starts escalating and getting out of control, you need to know when to stop, when to say, hey, let's come back and talk about this at a later time. I can't do this right now.
It's going to take about 5 or 10 minutes per issue, and that's all. And that's why we say cap it at 20 to 30 minutes. You might share one issue each, or you each share one issue, and then you each share a second issue at most in a given session.
Right.
So that nobody feels threatened that this can go on and on.
Right.
If you are very challenged, though, and your session just doesn't go well, which is not likely to happen if you're going to stick rigidly to the rules. If you're doing it by the rules, yeah. But if it did, you want to say, you know what, I need a timeout. This is too intense for me. So can we pick this up later?
The timeout probably should be at least about 30 minutes.
Right.
Because that's going to give your brain time to de-escalate and get out of that kind of fight or flight mode that really bypasses your reasoning center in your brain. You want to be able to think reasonably and logically.
But don't wait more than a day to come back to it. If you have to abort one of your sessions, make another session. Either later that day, at least no more than 30 minutes close. You want to give yourself at least 30 minutes. But set another time. If you ruin one, don't just say, well, we didn't get to have that session. That's really not fair. So reschedule if one gets messed up.
Right. So you want your spouse to have the confidence that you're going to bring up and resolve issues. Sometimes that is a critical component of the issues that couple have. Is when one of them feels like issues can never be brought up, or if they come up, they never get finished.
And this is a beautiful process for you to learn. So many couples never learn how to deal with their issues. Mm-hmm. So knowing how to do this in a way that's positive is going to make an impact on your relationship.
Doing this session well and the preceding homework and things that you've been doing is usually a pretty big turning point with couples that we meet with. Mm-hmm. So remember to do your homework from all the preceding homework that's been given, adding this to it.
Okay, that concludes the lesson. Let's go to the next one called
Using the Method, where we actually walk you through using what you've just learned. As you go through the process, remember to begin with simple requests. Basically, you're just making your spouse aware of body language or choice of words, for example.
You will need to adjust this to address more complicated issues to allow discussion back and forth to work with the listener's perspective when it's not a matter of a simple adjustment. For example, balancing a budget or asking the listener to take on more work. So let's talk about using the method, and this is speaker-listener rules. Right. So we're going to have rules for the speaker presenting an issue, rules for the listener hearing the issue.
So you've listened to the instructions, and you should have a handout. You want to pull that handout for this part. So basically what we're going to do first is we're going to have you pick who is the speaker, who is the listener, and we're going to start with there. Remember the roles. If you're the speaker, you're the one sharing an issue. If you're the listener, you're the one hearing the issue.
All right, now hopefully you have determined who the first one is that's going to share is the speaker and who the listener is going to be.
So you want to remember to frame what you need to see happen in the relationship in the form of a positive request.
Narrow it down to just 1 to 3 sentences. Don't
no
get
barbs,
anything,
no jabs.
Nothing complicated.
Right.
Make it just one issue.
It needs to be simple. So we suggest that you pick something along the lines of what escalates or closes you, such as tone of voice, facial expressions, or choice of words. An example of this would be, for example, Would you please not use the firm tone with me? Now that you can phrase yours and a positive request similarly to that. It's that simple. You don't want to elaborate. Pause the video and form your positive request.
Okay, so now as the listener, my response would be, so what you're asking me is that you would like for me to not use a firm tone when I'm speaking with you.
Right.
You really don't have to add anything to it. Just
Not at this
repeat
stage.
word for word what you heard them say.
Now, it would also be appropriate if there were jabs, but we don't want to pull the spotlight off the speaker and turn it on the listener. But if there were jabs that just make it to where you cannot continue.
For example,
I wish you would quit using the firm tone when you talk to me.
ouch.
Sean needs to address that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So, see, if we did not present well, and we need to ask for help sometime, and when you're doing self-help, you might want to say, I'm not really sure how to present this. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And then we allow the listener to help us rephrase, wow, that felt a little bit negative for me. Would you try it again?
Yeah.
And that way we're coaching each other how to phrase it well so it doesn't spiral downward.
There's no one better than your spouse to help you know how to better present what you're saying.
Right. So take a moment, pause the video, listener, go ahead and respond.
All right, now it's the speaker's turn again to say whether yes, that's what I was saying, or no, that's not what I said, and then they need to repeat it.
Right. Keep working on this until the speaker agrees that the listener heard correctly. So once you get to the place where the speaker says, yes, you did say that correctly, we can move to the next step.
Right, so now the listener needs to ask, do you have any other information that you would like to share with me about that?
Keep it surface level and brief. It is not necessary to drag the speaker through the mud of, well, it felt like this and it felt like that.
You wounded me so horribly.
I need you to see exactly how I felt. That is not necessary to get the changes that
You
we
want
need.
to just give them just a little bit more information about what it felt like to be you.
Yes. And so the thing is, if you're watching this video, your marriage is probably not to the level where you can hear each other there yet. So let's hold off on that. Keep it surface level. And the type thing you might want to share now are things that would clarify. Well, when you do that, when you speak to me in the firm tone, it reminds me of when my father scolded me when I was a child. So I'm giving a little bit of information to help him understand why that's a problem for me, but I'm not elaborating. I'm not going into a lot of details. So go ahead and listener, let's invite the speaker and give the speaker 1 to 3 sentences to share a little bit more information if necessary.
Okay, now at this point, the listener wants to connect with what the speaker shared.
Let's make some connecting comments like, that makes sense that you would feel that way.
Thank you for sharing that with me.
Wow, I didn't know you felt like that.
That must have really hurt.
So we don't have to agree with the speaker to connect with the speaker. It's okay that the speaker has a different perspective.
A different experience than you.
And so we can say that makes sense that you would feel that way, or I can understand that would hurt, even if we don't agree, because that is the speaker's reality, and we have to validate that.
So at this point, it would be appropriate to apologize. For example, I would say, I'm sorry for the times that I've spoken to you in a harsh tone.
In a firm tone.
In a firm tone, too.
And so, we can apologize. That doesn't mean we did it on purpose, that we intentionally sinned. But if I accidentally step on your toes in the church lobby, I would apologize, even if I did it accidentally, because I didn't mean to intentionally or unintentionally cause discomfort for you.
All right, at this time, we need to have a plan in place. It's likely that if there's an issue, it's probably going to come up again.
There's habits, and until we can stop those habits and establish new ones, we need help from the speaker to make those changes. So now it's appropriate for the speaker to say, if it happens again, what can I do to make you aware?
So I think, let's give it for example.
Right.
So if you were to say to me, that's a firm tone, then that would let me know.
Okay.
It's the wording that I've given
Right.
that is acceptable to me to be
Right.
able to hear her letting me know it's taking place.
So speaker and listener, take a moment now where the speaker will ask the listener, what can I do to make you aware if it happens again? Listener, give a short, like maybe 1 to 3 words if you can, to let the speaker have words to use if this were to happen again.
All right, at this point, the listener needs to ask the speaker, do you feel like that this issue has been resolved?
And speaker, let's don't set the standard too high here. If we have a plan set in place for what we will do if it happens in the future, let's let that be resolved and have good faith in the listener to make the change, and good faith in you that you're going to call it to their attention if it happens again. After all, you're the one who notices. Now, if the answer to this question is no, the listener wants to ask, what would it take for you to feel that this issue is resolved?
Right. So, for example, I would say, do you feel like that this issue has been resolved?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And then it should be as simple as that. This should be a 5 to 10 minute bouncing back and forth. No one is monologuing. You're dialoguing in little pieces here.
You want to change roles now, and now the one who is the speaker is going to be the listener, and the listener is going to be the speaker.
So now it's the other spouse's turn.
As you go through this, you want to keep your notes for what the
Yes.
steps are, so you can stick by that and don't just fly by the seat of your pants.
You don't want to be skipping steps.
That's right. Remember that the method that you're using is more important than the issue itself.
And to conclude this video, let's just say, watch the homework. You need to have 2 or 3 times a week according to the video. Go back and listen to that, or look at your notes if you need to, so that you can practice using this method, but stick to things that are simple.
We usually see a lot of positive turnaround when couples start finally feeling that they're being heard.
We look forward to seeing you next time in the next video about meeting marital needs.